Welcome to Become an Idol. I'm Dr. Robin Sargent, owner of Idol Courses. This is the place where newbies come to learn and veterans share their knowledge. I have here with me today Stanislav Nachev, and I got introduced to him through the Idle Courses Academy. He joined the Academy during our fourth cohort, and I just want to introduce him and share his success story because he recently became an idol. And so, Stanislav, will you please introduce yourself formally, kind of tell us your background and just a little bit about who you are, and then I'll grill you with questions.
Sounds good. So I spent the last probably 10 years or so in education, and I did all kinds of different, took all kinds of different roles. I didn't really end up as a teacher at any given point, even though I did teach a fair bit in different places. And I worked basically with all kinds of different learners from kindergarten all the way up to grade 12 and including adults, more so adults towards the kind of the latter part of those 10 years. And for the 4 of those years, I had a dream to be an instructional designer. And it became clear to me that my passion was with instructional design, more so when I realized that I can't really survive, so to speak, in a classroom. I have a lot of respect for teachers that can make that work for them. Having worked in different schools and having seen what that's like, I realized that instructional design is a place where I want to be. And I spent one of my jobs spent about 3 weeks creating a course, a ESL course, an English as a second language course, and I wanted to explore more of that and create more training programs and materials. And when I dived into it, I realized that everything that I've been working towards, everything that I've been doing in my different experiences, different jobs, has been sort of accumulating and building up to this moment when I can be an instructional designer.
So now you say that you were in education and you taught K through 12 adults, and you only sometimes taught. So could you be a little more specific? Like, what were some of the titles? Like, what were you doing in education? If you weren't a teacher, were you an ed tech person, or what were you?
So I'll start with the last role that I had, which was an assistive technology trainer or assistive technology coach. And assistive technology basically encompasses anything that deals with accessibility challenges. And those could be physical, they could be mental, they could be on different levels in terms of and regarding to the learner and the material they need to learn. So I was basically coaching and training students that were in the sort of middle to high school level, and also their teachers a lot of the times, on how to use the text-to-speech, speech-to-text, reading and writing technology that would allow them to be able to easier access materials and be able to exchange different pieces of work that the student has completed and that the teacher needs to be completed as part of their program or the course that they're doing. And besides actually just doing sort of the ed tech side of things, of showing how a piece of software worked or an app on their phone or their tablet, I also provided, and this is where sort of a little bit of the instructional design kind of creeps in, is as part of my job, I had to also teach them different learning strategies. And a lot of those learning strategies had a sort of a holistic approach as to how they meshed with the actual product that was being used. For instance, it's not just about using a text-to-speech app. It's also, for instance, using it in a moment when you could pair something else along with it. Let's say you need to do a homework, and instead of reading that piece of text, you listen to it while you're jotting down notes. So note taking, for instance, along with read and write, or a text-to-speech app is one type of strategy could be used. So that's sort of that's the sort of line of work that I did there. And then another one was I was facilitating these Lego workshops. So I was using different Lego kits, and there was a program that I had to present over a span of 5 weeks at a time with one particular school, and then the owner of the company one summer asked me to, because he wanted to implement new technology, he asked me to come up with something with Lego robotics, because that was at the time something that was quite popular with the younger audience. And he basically threw a Lego robotics kit my way, and he said, see what you can come up with. And I spent probably 3 months researching and putting together different sample lessons, and trying to come up with a sort of a program that could really work for the company, that would be that would create a model that would be easy to disassemble, be logistically possible to fit in within the 60 minutes that we had allocated per lesson. And then that before that I did teach in a private school setting, because that's what's sort of possible where I live in Canada, without having to go to teachers college and earning a degree in that. And there I had an ESL course, as I mentioned, that that's how I got started. So I did a lot of research for that, and then I was just really enthused by the idea that I can design something that would be my own.
Oh my gosh, you have such a wonderful background for being an instructional designer, because so many instructional designers have to then learn about universal design for learning, or they have to kind of rework their framework to consider accessibility at the beginning of their design after they've been doing it for a while. And you actually come from that place. And so I've been, that's really, because just to be able to think about that right from the very beginning about making things inclusive for all the learners is a wonderful background to have. Okay, so you are doing this for like 10 years, and then you knew you wanted to transition into instructional design. And so what did you try to do before you joined the academy?
So I actually, and this is kind of the way that I found out about the academy as well, is the one person of contact that really got me into this was Christy Tucker. And I don't know if she listens to this or she ends up listening to this eventually, but I would love to thank her from the bottom of my heart for having come my way and having had conversations over LinkedIn messaging, and her introducing me to all different links and her blog. And I've seen webinars and podcasts with her, and I basically try to find everything on the web about the things that she does, and that's how I came across the Adult Course Academy eventually. And then I told myself, well, I deserve this. Like this is an investment in me. The financial side was a bit of an obstacle at first, but then I saw that you have that wonderful pay per month type of deal, and I thought, well, I want to do this. Like this is what my dream job is. And but before that, 4 years prior, I was sort of testing the water, and I wasn't quite sure what. And this is really important, I think, to sort of highlight is I wasn't quite sure what exactly an instructional designer does. And later on, I found out that an instructional designer does all kinds of things, and there are all kinds of flavors of instructional design, if you will. And I it's kind of what you want it to be, what you make it out to be. And that's where I wasn't um, quite certain on. I thought or it would be like these huge expectations with particular regards to the job. And the one that, out of all the different kinds, that was most mentally challenging was visual. Like I wasn't sure if I was a visual, if I'll be able to visually express my ideas, or if I'll be able to visually understand or learn in that sort of way. And uh, afterwards, I discovered that within the Idle Academy, and I have this to thank for as well, is that I'm actually not too bad at all for someone who is able to put together visual elements and represent my ideas through them. And the way that I accomplished that was through the infographic. And I think that's a great first piece for your portfolio. And it's a great first little bit to get started, even if you're not too sure if you want to do the instructional design as a career. I think, create an infographic, see what you come up with, and the sort of visual language that you represent through different symbols that you come up with and icons. And I think that's what sort of cemented my understanding and want to continue after sort of 4 years of should I do this or not, should I do this or not, and every year just kind of going back to it and exploring every single little bit. And I actually remember that I went back to I decided that like many others, I decided that I should study this in a university or a college. And I picked up a program here locally, but after not even taking one course, not even starting that one course, they said that they'll cancel the courses for that summer, so I couldn't really take any courses. And I just went off to exploring it and teaching myself instructional design through reading a bunch of different books and articles and so on.
Yeah, it's interesting that Christy Tucker was kind of your early mentor, and even though I started a little bit before you in 2012, as far as like making that transition, Christy Tucker was also my hero, and so
okay.
So it's
That's
funny,
really cool.
Just, I mean, how much she has impacted so many people in our industry and for so long. And now, of course, I have the pleasure to be, working alongside her in the e-learning freelancer bootcamp and things like that. But I know shout out to Chrissy Tucker all day. I mean, that blog is, and the fact that you can just message her is incredible. So you tried to start a program and they canceled classes on you, and then you just kept putting it to the side, but you knew that it was something that you liked. I mean, when you designed that Lego course and the ESL course.
Yeah. So those are those two pieces. I always went back to them in my mind, and every single time I had to like list all the achievements, all the things I was proud of. Those would come first. I'll be like, yes, I made that, and that's what I just kept going back to it in my life. You know how when during tough moments we always should or we would go back to times in our lives when we were successful, when we felt accomplished, and that's when I felt accomplished, and I wanted to make that my career. And I thought in some way that I found the funny thing is that you'd always find excuses for yourself to not do something because you don't feel as comfortable for it. And that's sort of how I felt during those 4 years. I always made up excuses like, oh, I'm not good with visual things, or oh no, I don't have like these expertise, or I don't have this piece of paper that says I can do this and that. And I just sort of made excuses for myself and kept basically bouncing from one kind of teaching job or a supportive job to another. And after after all these years, after finishing that stint that I as assistive technology coach, I just told myself towards the end of it, like I was basically sick of being in that space, and I didn't feel like I was really progressing. I'd basically reached the upper limits of what I could do without having had a teacher certificate, and most of my colleagues at the time, most of my peers, they were pivoting towards that. And I remember talking to one of the guys that I used to work with, and he said that he had just gotten sort of a part-time a teaching job at a school with a board, because he had his full certification to teach. And in fact, I was even a lot of the special ed teachers that I used to work with within the schools, because they were kind of like a touch point. A lot of them even said, like, they would ask me, like, "Oh, what's your future? You know, what do you plan on doing? Do you want a teaching job?" And I feel like they were ready to offer me one if I had the certification, but that's not where I wanted to be. Like, I wanted to create like the programs that they use to teach their students and everybody else. And I was more into creating the materials and the program, or the sort of the curriculum, if you will. And I actually had within that last role, I had the chance to initiate something that I'm actually feel quite proud of. Kind of combining my degree in English and in the instructional design side of things. I basically complained for the first 3 weeks of within my role that there's no style guide, there's no manual to which we could write reports for that role, because one of the key things that we had to do is we had to write a report for the teacher and for the parent after each session with the student. And I talked to my direct manager. I spoke to current managers who are one level above that, basically saying we need to create within the company some kind of a standard for all these reports that we write, because it's crazy. Like, everybody seems to be doing whatever they want, and it's difficult to learn as a new person within the company. It's difficult to learn how to actually do these reports. And I explained to them my previous experience, having worked in the sort of a publishing news journalism business for a little bit. I said, like, we need some kind of a style guide. Like, we need a solid foundation that we can all refer to, with templates, with guides, and with explanation, with sample work that we can look at, that would be easy for all of us to do. So eventually, after 3 months, they ended up putting us all together in the corner of a coffee shop. Basically, me and I think it was 10 or 12 sort of teammates that we all work within the same district. We sat down and we spent probably I'd say almost a full day discussing and thinking and putting together a manual, which was like over a 30-page manual that essentially became the foundation of what would be used within that district for everybody to be able to source and inspiration from, and draw samples from. And it had everything in it. Like, obviously I cannot really use that in any way in my portfolio at all, because that's something that's proprietary to the company. But I feel very proud of that achievement, because it's something that I started out with a problem that I had a vision of what would be the solution, and then moved towards collaboration, and finally towards wrapping it up and having a solid material that could be used.
And so I just love your stories, Stanislav. So it took you 4 years of kind of like some fits and starts, and then you finally made the commitment to invest in yourself. And we started that cohort in early June 2020. And then you landed your job, just last month in September?
Yeah, actually maybe 10 days ago.
Okay.
No, less, like a week ago. That's when I got the confirmation. That's when I said I got the offer, and I said, yeah, a couple of days after that. And that's because I felt that whatever the other offer was, it wasn't going to beat LinkedIn.
Oh yeah, surprise, you're working at LinkedIn Learning. Oh,
yeah.
So that's 3 months. So you made the decision, you invested in the academy, and then within 3 months, you basically land your dream job. So I want to know, like, how far in the coursework, like how much of your portfolio and like, what did you get done before you started applying and going through the process? What did that look like for you? Because I know it's different for everybody.
Oh, absolutely. I think that I would be probably and it's really bad to compare myself, but uh, I'd say that probably I've done the least, what I feel like is the least amount of work, because I've got an infographic, and I have sort of an e-learning template, if you will, done, and that's probably about it. Like, I've created some graphic assets, and I have like sort of a rough idea of a course that I've actually shared, and I kind of have like the workflow of like the interactions of like what would the learner click and where would it lead them, sort of thing. So I have that, but other than that, I don't really have a whole lot. Like, I started out thinking that I need to have a complete portfolio, and honest to God, thank God I didn't go down that route, because I would still not have a job. I just basically told myself that regardless of which way I end up, if somebody requires some sort of a sample, then I will provide a sample of some sort. But I didn't really get hung up too much on, which is very unlike me. I'm usually like very much by the book. I always try to have everything completed, everything ready at the right time, and so on, and very much a perfectionist in that sense. And I didn't let that hold me back. I just started applying to a dozen jobs, and as I said, I had that. Um, I guess before we started the recording, I have that contact at LinkedIn that really sort of helped me. But I kept in touch with that person for basically the extent of the cohort at ADL. So in some ways, I was feeding her things that I was working on. So I was basically telling her, "Hey, I'm working on this month," and then a few weeks later or a month, I'd be like, "Hey, I've made this sort of new thing. Check it out." And so that, I think, in some ways, perhaps solidified that connection, sort of proving that I'm serious about this. Um, and then just kind of went from there. The other job that I applied to um, didn't really require per se a portfolio, a link to a portfolio. Instead, they gave me an assignment that I had to do, which I had about 3 or 4 days to work on. And I used every single little bit that I had learned from the Adult Academy for that, and everything else that I know for that particular assignment. And they were surprised that it had taken me the time that it did, because they were expecting basically triple that amount of time for the work that I had actually put into it. So I was very efficient with the way that I tackled that particular assignment.
And so you didn't have your portfolio done. Did you
Mm-hmm.
update your LinkedIn profile?
I updated it with the fact that I have I'm doing the Idle Course Academy. I then also, like, this was months ago though, I put down that I was a freelance instructional or learning experience designer. And from there on, I'd say that the majority of my work went into the actual resume and cover letter, and I have JLash to thank a huge amount for, as well as Molly Parsons for the guides that they have created online. That's part of the Adult Course Academy that have allowed me to zero in on exactly and be able to take apart not just my resume, but also the job ads, most importantly, because that really allowed me to focus on exactly what I can do out of that one particular job that I have liked, and not to be disillusioned by the title. If the title is fancy, but maybe they asking me to do things that I wouldn't be quite as passionate about, it would allow me to figure out how much design work will I actually be doing, and how much freedom would I actually be allowed to have. And that was really important in kind of disseminating and clearing out any kind of fog that I might have, and illusions about a job, which is very important for anybody who's going in as a beginner into this and who has no experience, uh, because we do a lot of different kinds of roles within the Adult Academy, I find, and not every company will ask you to do everything. So to me, how much designing I will do was really more important.
So how many jobs do you think you directly applied to? And I know, it's that you just kept in contact with that one. So how many did you apply to, like, guesstimate, and how many interviews did you have, like, per company? And then how did you
Okay,
land this final one?
this is gonna shock, I think, a lot of people, because the common sort of belief is that you have to apply to at least 100, which is depending on what you're going for. Before the pandemic, I did apply to like 70 jobs it was like a learning specialist or something like that, and it wasn't anything that was as instructional design heavy. So I'd applied to a lot before, and I had a lot of interviews back then, but a lot of things sort of changed, and I can't really draw as much connection to that at this point because of how things have shifted. But I'd say in the past, like, I guess 2 months, or less than, like, actually more like a month and a bit, I probably applied to maybe a dozen jobs, maybe like 10 or 12 jobs. And I've had, so I had one interview with a company that was doing accessibility training. And that interview was sort of a forced interview on my part, because I basically found a way through the website of the company to get a hold of someone at the company that would listen to me, that I'll be able to talk to and share what my experiences are. And then they gave me, turned out it was a salesperson, but either way, someone to talk to. I ended up sending, through another email, I ended up sending my resume. I didn't really hear back from that company, but that's all right. I kept applying. And then I had the LinkedIn learning interview, and then I had the one with D2L. And that's pretty much it. Like, I had those three interviews, about 10 or 12 jobs that I had applied for. I was considering a bunch more, depending on how things would have panned out. But as I said, I'm really fortunate that I had that connection and the networking that I had done previously. So I've done a lot of work prior to this instance of, like, okay, let's start applying. And that's kind of like the flow of the Idle Course Academy for me personally, is that it was a lot of, like, sort of prep work that you do. Like, you build pieces that you put together in different ways that end up coming up to a grander design.
So let's unpack how you actually landed your job. So, I mean, you got a few interviews, and you actually started laying the groundwork for LinkedIn Learning pretty early, just kind of staying in contact with the content manager.
She's actually and it surprised me as well to find this out. She's the head of business content strategy at LinkedIn Learning.
Okay, content strategy. Okay, so you kept
Yeah.
it. You just, like, how did you reach out to her in the first place? What did you say?
Well, that's sort of the crazy story. Her name's Jolly. So I reached out. I find out about Jolly that through a course that she has on LinkedIn Learning for resumes. And again, this is way before. I'd say probably about a month before I joined the Adult Course Academy. I was working on my resume, and I found this course that she was doing, and did the course. And I found that the way that she'd done the course was beautiful. Like, it was so well paced, and she had really good ways of explaining different kinds of resume templates, and tackling and basically staying organized, tackling different jobs. And I really love that. And I was like, well, I want to find out who this person is. So I looked her up on LinkedIn and followed her. And a few weeks later, I saw that she had posted. She made a post, sort of a global post, saying that she has, like, sort of like office hours to help out job seekers who are looking for help with their LinkedIn profile, with their resume. So I reached out and I basically grabbed the last slot that she had. And she's like, yeah, I'll put you down if this is okay for you. And she's in a different time zone, but I'm like, yeah, I don't care. It doesn't matter. Just whatever time you got, I'll be there. And had basically a sort of a Zoom call, but it was like a Microsoft Teams or something like that. And it was supposed to be 15 minutes. And I sent her my resume beforehand. And she kind of looked it over and she's like, oh, you studied English? And I was like, yeah. And then she's like, oh, us English majors need to stick together. I did English as well. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. So she looked at all my experience and she was kind of like, okay, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And I sort of explained to her that I have this dream about e-learning and instructional design and, basically creating a learning experience in different ways to be able to immerse the learner and make them more engaged and present content that's relevant to them. And she's like, wow, I could tell you really have a lot of passion for this. Let's keep you on our radar. And that, when she said those words, it's like the magical words. It just basically unlocked something in me, and I just felt so inspired to just keep on going. And I was like, wow, how amazing would it be if I could land a job at LinkedIn Learning, like the company that I've taken so many courses at, that I found out so many things through. It'd be amazing. So I was really inspired for the next few months, and my enthusiasm kind of ebbed and flowed as the time went on. I was like, oh, maybe this will work out, maybe it won't. Kept in touch with her, and then she would constantly update me like, oh yeah, there's this position, or maybe like this will work out, maybe not. And and it just kind of then got into the Idle Course Academy. I thought, okay, here's a great chance to build something and to really prove both to myself and to everybody else that I can actually do this, regardless of what sort of credentials or diplomas or degrees I have. And and then just every single little thing that I did, I updated her on, and I said, hey, this is what I've completed. Would you like to take a look at that? And she's like, oh, that's really cool. That's interesting. And then and she kind of she also became one of my mentors through that course, through those conversations we had. And eventually I persisted, and the role that I got is, I think, a good stepping stone to continue on.
So did she send you the job directly? I mean, the one that you applied for?
She basically said, there's a role that's related to instructional design that's regarding basically curating different course playlists, so to speak, is what they call them. And she explained that it's content mapping, and I had no idea what that was at the time. And I was like, yeah, it seems interesting. It's a good entryway into the company, into the industry in general. Basically, I think 3 weeks after that, I was reached out by one of her managers, because she said that it's with a manager that works for her, actually. And I thought, well, that's wonderful. I think the biggest obstacle there was that I live in Canada, and LinkedIn Learning is based out of the States, and they don't necessarily have an office here that I could get hired out of and be treated as a Canadian employee working in Canada. So they basically set it up so that I'm essentially a contingent worker at LinkedIn, and that way I don't have to deal with I guess any kind of labor issues or anything like that.
So they not only hired you, Stanislav, they made a way to hire you.
Yeah, which is huge. I couldn't be thankful enough. It was a good sort of match between seeing the passion that I have for the e-learning and also figuring out all the other logistics of it, and I'm super happy and thankful for having come across all these people and having that opportunity.
And just that's just the power of like building that relationship too. I mean, Jolly just like probably like fell in love with you and was like, oh my gosh, he's just so persistent. He's got like, all these key features that I would like to have on my team. And so then she's like, oh, this job is underneath me. And so she probably like handed your resume to that manager. Is like, you've got to find a way, interview him. I'm sure you're gonna love him. And
yeah. I mean, I'm not quite sure how it worked out, but like I think that's that sounds like a plausible way. I think that's I did have to resubmit my resume for the position. Like it's not like it was kind of handed to me or anything. I did have to go through a laborious process, and now I think it's great to have that contact, and I have gotten jobs before where I didn't necessarily have a contact, and I was able to land different positions. But I think that nudge definitely helps along the way as you go along, and having that mentor to guide you through the process is huge, and it's something that every idol in the course academy would benefit from in general. Like I think that we all have unique abilities and unique talents and skills and passions. So I think that's it's really important to have someone that can help you highlight those.
So when do you start? Have you started already?
I have not. I've been going through a lot of laborious and meticulous paperwork and background checks and things that I have to sign and things I have to get approved, and it's a tricky process that I've never had to navigate personally. It's not as simple as like, here's a contract, sign on the dotted line, and off you go. It's like the different agreements that they want you to sign to sort of make sure that everything is legally secure and so on. And that's the sort of thing that you kind of learn as you. Even I'm sure that you as a business owner, you deal with a lot of that stuff. So. Depending on the people that you hire and the people that you work for on the other hand as well. So.
And so I imagine this role is completely remote.
It is, yeah. Well, initially, here's the fun fact. Initially, Jolie was asking me, are you willing to relocate? And now, I don't know if you're familiar, but LinkedIn Learning is in California. So if things hadn't panned out with the pandemic the way they are, I might have had to relocate to California. I don't know. It's maybe in some parallel universe that's what happened.
And then you learned how to surf.
Yeah, that's right.
We might as well go all the way down that parallel universe. So you didn't have to relocate. You get to work remotely. Are you making more than you ever have before?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, I'd definitely say. And that's sort of the one thing that really kind of also helped me with the choice, because the other company that I was with, I sort of knew from the beginning how much they would be able to offer me, and considering it was a smaller company, I didn't really. I felt that the role, even though the role actually said instructional designer, I feel like I would have had a lot of constraints regarding the work that I was doing. Plus, they seemed like they were really on a time crunch. Like they wanted a lot of their designs to be sort of done as quickly as possible, and a lot of that came down to the backlog that I had, which sort of made me think like, okay, if that's the case, then couldn't you have expedited the process that you hire, the way that you hire, and so on. The one thing that really put a damper on the whole thing is that it was at the very end that they were asking me to provide references, and that's usually something that I feel like companies should ask for right at the beginning, because if it's a time issue where you have to make also a choice as someone who's choosing which company to work for, if it's a formal detail as little as references, then say, hey, provide these contacts so that we can check them along the way, and then at some point the company can do their checks and so on and make their decision based on that. But like to ask for that at the very last step, I think that's where I was like, okay, like this basically makes it clear to me which way I need to go. So it was one of the things that I considered.
That's funny because that's actually pretty common, right?
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're not going to go through the trouble of making phone calls for all the references unless they want to hire that person.
True. Okay.
Yeah,
well,
so it means they wanted to hire you.
Yeah. It sounded like I'm not discrediting that notion. I just thought that it presented a time challenge for myself because I had to make a decision whether I wanted to go with LinkedIn or not.
I think you knew what the right decision was the whole time. I mean, I'm pretty sure you're probably like pinching yourself that like you just had this in your mind, like, wouldn't it be cool if I could work for LinkedIn Learning? And holy cow, 3 months later, you're working for LinkedIn Learning. So I mean, just an incredible story. And so I want you, Stanislav, just to share like from, in summary, like what's kind of like your best tip for those that are wanting to become an idol, just based on your own experiences of landing your first job?
I'd say use your portfolio not just to create different pieces that you can impress companies with, but use your portfolio as a network piece to be able to connect as many people as possible. That's sort of the path that I took, that I had the mindset for. I wanted my portfolio to not be just a portfolio of different pieces that I can show visually, but also how many people I was able to connect through with it. How many people did I touch with that portfolio that can help me build even more onto it. So you could argue that the portfolio started 4 years ago when I met Christy Tucker, and I made that first connection. So from there on, I kept connecting with more and more people that could help me build that portfolio.
Yeah, and I just love that. I mean, that strategy where not only were you building your portfolio, but you were sharing the things that you learned with the people that you wanted to work with and that you wanted to learn from.
Yeah.
And I think
that's right.
That's just so valuable. I mean, I hadn't really thought about, that. Like sometimes I'll say things like, share what you're learning in a LinkedIn post or something like that. But to actually just directly like use that as a resource to make the connection, like, because sometimes it's hard for people to even figure out like, oh, okay, like, I admire this person and I want to talk to them, but I don't know like what to talk to them about without coming off as needy or, being a taker. And instead, like if you just share what you're learning and what you're working on, one, you stay at top of mind, and two, like you've just made that conversation easy. You're not even asking for anything. You're just like, hey, check it out.
Yeah, it's I find more often companies are interested in how you solve problems, and what kind of process you take to get there, and what kind of steps you take, rather than impressing them with the final result. Because there are a lot of people out there that will try to do that very same thing just to show off the product. Oh, look what I made. Look how fancy it is. Well, yeah, but like, what is that? That doesn't really tell much about how you got there. It just gives us the final result, the solution, the answer to the question. We don't even know what the question is.
That's so good. Thank you so much, Stanislav. I really appreciate you coming and being on my podcast and just sharing what you've learned.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak with you and to share my experiences.
Thank you so much for listening. You can find the show notes for this episode at idlecourses.com. If you like this podcast and you want to become an instructional designer and online learning developer, join me in the Idle Courses Academy, where you'll learn to build all the assets you need to land your first instructional design job, early access to this podcast, tutorials for how to use the e-learning authoring tools, templates for everything course building, and paid instructional design experience opportunities. Go to idlecourses.com/academy and enroll or get on the waitlist. Now get out there and build transcendent courses.